The Nazis wanted to build a tank the size of a residential house. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a rejected Hollywood screenplay. This was a real, government-approved project with actual engineers, actual blueprints, and an actual budget. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why even the people who designed it were terrified of what they'd created. But here's the twist that nobody talks about. They almost built it. And if they had, well, let's just say World War II would have looked very, very different. The man behind the madness. Picture this. It's 1942. Hitler's sitting in his war room, probably eating some overcooked schnitzel, and an engineer named Edward Grott walks in with the most insane PowerPoint presentation in human history. Except it's not a PowerPoint, because, it's 1942. It's probably just a really intense napkin sketch. Grott says, "Mein Führer, what if we build a tank so big that enemy soldiers would literally just give up when they saw it?" And Hitler, being Hitler, doesn't ask can we, or should we? He asks how soon. This is how the Landkreuzer P.1000 Ratte was born. And yes, rat means rat in German, which is hilarious because this thing was about as subtle as a rat wearing a tuxedo at a cat convention. The numbers that don't make sense. Let me paint you a picture with numbers that sound like I'm making them up. The rat would have weighed 1,000 metric tons. To put that in perspective, a modern main battle tank weighs about 60 tons. The rat would have been heavier than 16 modern tanks combined. It would have been heavier than a fully loaded Boeing 747. It was essentially a naval warship that someone forgot to put in the water. Length? 115 feet. That's longer than a blue whale. That's longer than an NBA basketball court. If you parked it on a residential street, it would block the entire thing and probably crack the pavement just by existing. Width? 46 feet. This thing wouldn't fit through a tunnel. It wouldn't fit on most roads. Hell, it wouldn't fit through most towns. Height? 36 feet. That's a 3-story building, with treads and guns. Speaking of guns, weapons of naval destruction. Here's where it gets absolutely bonkers. The main armament wasn't tank guns. Oh no, the Nazis looked at tank guns and said, "That's cute. What if we put naval battleship cannons on it instead?" The Rat was designed to carry two 280mm naval guns. These were the same weapons mounted on the Scharnhorst-class battleships. Each shell weighed over 500 pounds. These weren't bullets. These were flying Volkswagen Beetles made of explosive death. But wait, there's more. Like a terrible infomercial that keeps getting worse, the Rat also included 128mm anti-tank gun, because apparently the naval cannons weren't enough. 8 20mm anti-aircraft guns to swat away those pesky fighter planes. 2 15mm machine guns for, shooting at infantry who were already having the worst day of their lives. This wasn't a tank. This was a floating fortress that forgot to float. The crew, a small village on treads. A modern tank usually has about 4 crew members. The Rat needed more than 40 people. 40 people, that is not a crew. That is a small office. Inside this machine, there were commanders, multiple drivers working in shifts, gunners for each weapon system, loaders doing extremely dangerous physical work, engineers constantly fixing problems, radio operators trying to communicate, and probably even a cook. Imagine the staff meetings. Imagine the bathroom situation. Imagine being the person whose job is to oil a tread the size of a dump truck. Problem number 1. How do you move a house? So you've designed a 1,000-ton death machine. Congratulations. Now, how do you move it? The engine proposed for the Rat was basically 8 submarine diesel engines strapped together. These weren't car engines. These were marine engines designed to power U-boats through the ocean. And even with all that power, the Rat's top speed would have been about 25 miles per hour on a good road. 25 miles per hour. A motivated jogger could keep pace with Nazi Germany's ultimate weapon. Tour de France cyclists would have lapped it. But here's the real kicker. There were no good roads for the Rat. It was too heavy for literally every bridge in Europe. Every single one. The Germans would have had to drive it through rivers. Not over bridges, through the actual rivers. Like some kind of extremely angry, extremely expensive, extremely German submarine with legs. Problem number 2. The ground betrays you. The ground pressure of the Rat would have been so enormous that it would sink into anything softer than solid concrete. Mud? Sinking. Soft soil? Sinking. That nice field over there? Sinking, but now it's a trench. The Nazis tried to solve this with massive treads. Each track was over 6 feet wide. But physics doesn't care about your ambitions. Physics just laughs in Newton's laws. Fun fact, if the Rat got stuck, and it would get stuck, you couldn't just call a tow truck. There were no tow trucks big enough. You need to build a second Rat just to pull out the first one. And then what happens when the second one gets stuck? That's right, you need a third Rat. It's rats all the way down. Problem number 3, the target you can't miss. Stealth is important in warfare. Surprise is important. Not being seen by every reconnaissance plane in a 50-mile radius is very important. The Rat had none of that. This thing could be spotted from space. If satellites had existed in 1942, astronauts would have called down, "Hey, there's a German house driving around Poland." You guys seeing this? Every Allied bomber crew would have made it their personal mission to destroy this thing. And here's the beautiful irony. Despite all its anti-aircraft guns, the Rat would have been incredibly vulnerable to air attack. Its armor was thick on the top, sure, but armor doesn't mean much when you're being hit by 1,000-pound bombs from high altitude. Repeatedly, all day long. It would have been like painting a bullseye on a warehouse, and then being surprised when everyone shoots at the warehouse. Problem number 4, the logistical nightmare. Let's talk fuel. The Rat would have consumed fuel like a fraternity consumes beer during rush week. Estimates suggest it would burn through about 2 liters per kilometer. That's not miles per gallon, that's gallons per mile. In the worst way possible, to move this thing 100 miles, you'd need approximately 40,000 gallons of fuel. That's enough fuel to drive a normal car around the Earth. Twice. And ammunition? Each of those 280mm shells weighed over 500 pounds. The Rat could carry maybe 200 rounds total. That sounds like a lot until you realize that in combat, you could burn through that in less than an hour. Then what? You got a 1,000-ton paperweight. Supply lines were already Germany's Achilles heel in World War II. The Rat would have required its own dedicated supply army just to keep it running. Fuel trucks, ammunition trucks, spare parts trucks, and probably therapy trucks for the crew. When engineers become fortune tellers. By 1943, even the most enthusiastic Nazi engineers were starting to sweat. They ran the numbers. They built the models. They did the math that Hitler definitely didn't want to see. And they came to a unanimous conclusion. This thing would be a catastrophic failure. Picture the meeting. Some poor engineer has to walk into Hitler's office and say, "So, about that invincible super tank? Yeah, it's actually a very expensive coffin that can't cross bridges." Armaments Minister Albert Speer, who was surprisingly good at his job, despite working for, the Nazis, took one look at the Rat project and said, absolutely not. Not because he was a good person, he wasn't, but because he could actually do basic math. Speer calculated that the resources needed to build one Rat could instead build 8 Tiger tanks, actually effective, or dozens of anti-tank guns, actually useful, or hundreds of trucks, actually what Germany desperately needed. The cancellation. In 1943, Speer officially canceled the project. No fanfare, no dramatic explosion, just a memo that probably said, "We're not building the giant tank. Everyone go home." But here's what's chilling. The cancellation wasn't because the Nazis suddenly developed common sense. It was because they were losing the war and couldn't afford to waste resources on a vanity project anymore. If Germany had been winning, if they had unlimited resources, they absolutely would have built it. And it still would have been a disaster, just a much more expensive one. The Rat's spiritual successor. You think the story ends here. But oh no, the Nazis, in their infinite wisdom, looked at the failed Rat project and thought, you know what we need? A bigger one. Enter the Landkreuzer P.1000 monster. Yes, that was its actual name. The monster, because subtlety was not a German strong suit in the 1940s. This abomination would have weighed 1,500 tons and carried an 800mm railway gun, the largest artillery piece ever built. It would have been less of a tank and more of a moving war crime. Thankfully, This got canceled even faster than the Rat. Speer took one look at the blueprints and probably just started crying. The danger of gigantism. Here's what's fascinating and terrifying about the Rat. It represents a disease that infected Nazi military thinking. And honestly, a disease that infects a lot of military thinking even today. Bigger must be better. It's the same logic that led to other disasters. The Bismarck battleship sunk on its first real mission. The Gustav railway gun moved so slowly it was basically useless. The V-3 cannon never worked properly. Germany was losing the war not because their weapons weren't big enough, but because they were wasting time and resources building impractical monstrosities instead of reliable, mass-producible equipment. While Germany was designing 1,000-ton tanks, the Soviet Union was churning out thousands of T-34s. Simple, effective, and most importantly, they actually worked. War isn't won by having the biggest weapon. It's won by having enough weapons that work, supplied to soldiers who can use them at the right time and place. The psychology of the superweapon. But why build something like the Rat in the first place? It's propaganda. It's ego. It's the seductive appeal of the wonder weapon. The idea that one incredible invention can turn the tide of an entire war. Hitler was obsessed with this concept. He believed that Germany could engineer its way to victory through technological superiority. Just build something big enough, scary enough, powerful enough, and the enemy will simply surrender. Except they won't, because in war, practicality beats spectacle every single time. The Rat was meant to terrify, and maybe it would have for about 5 minutes until it sank into a river or got stuck in a field or attracted every bomber in the Allied arsenal like moths to a very large, very explosive flame. The lesson nobody learned. Here's the dark part. We didn't learn from this. After World War II, nations kept chasing superweapons. Nuclear-powered bombers, canceled. Atomic cannons briefly existed, quickly obsolete. Flying aircraft carriers, never practical. Railguns, still trying to make them work. The appeal of the ultimate weapon is just too strong. Every generation of military planners thinks, yeah, that other superweapon was stupid, but ours will definitely work. Spoiler, it usually doesn't. If they'd actually built it. Let's play a dark hypothetical. What if Germany had somehow built the Rat? Best case scenario for Germany? They build one. It debuts on the Eastern Front. Soviet soldiers see this 3-story building rolling toward them and panic. It destroys a few fortifications, crushes some trenches, and becomes excellent propaganda for a few weeks. Then reality sets in. Soviet Il-2 ground attack aircraft focus all their attention on it. British bombers target it specifically. It gets stuck crossing a river. Partisans sabotage its fuel supply. It breaks down and can't be repaired in the field. Within months, it's either captured, destroyed, or abandoned. The resources spent building it could have produced dozens of actually useful vehicles. Worst case scenario, the Rat becomes such a propaganda symbol that Hitler demands they build more. Germany diverts critical resources away from practical weapons. The war ends even faster, but with even more German lives wasted in the process. Either way, building the Rat would have helped the Allies win the war faster. The tanks that actually mattered. Want to know what actually made a difference in World War II? The Soviet T-34. Reliable, mass-produced, good enough. The American Sherman. Not the best tank, but they built 50,000 of them. The German Panzer IV. Practical, upgradable, effective. These weren't revolutionary. They weren't sexy. They didn't make engineers giggle with glee at their absurdity. They were just good at their job. And in war, that's all that matters. The Rat would have been revolutionary, certainly. Revolutionary in how spectacularly it failed. The ideas that didn't happen. Here's the thought that should keep you up at night. The Rat was canceled. It never happened. It exists only as blueprints and what-if scenarios. But someone actually took this seriously. Engineers drew up plans. The Nazi government approved it. Resources were allocated. For a brief, terrifying moment in history, the Landkreuzer P.1000 Ratte was going to be built. What other insane ideas throughout history came within inches of reality? What other monuments to hubris almost got greenlit before someone, somewhere, had a moment of clarity? The Rat represents something deeper than just a failed weapon system. It represents the danger of grandiosity over practicality, the danger of ego over engineering, the danger of building something because you can, not because you should, the modern echo. And if you think this kind of thinking died with Nazi Germany, I've got news for you. It didn't. Every military on Earth has file cabinets full of wonder weapon proposals that got canceled at the last minute. Laser satellites, hypersonic drones, eye-controlled swarms, weapons so advanced, so powerful, so big that surely they'll change everything. Most of them won't work. Many of them shouldn't be built. But the temptation is always there to create something so impressive that it ends the war before it begins. The Rat whispers a warning from history. The most dangerous ideas aren't the ones that get built. They're the ones that almost get built. The final thought: a tank the size of a house, 2 naval cannons on treads, a crew of 40 trying to operate a moving building. It sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous. But for a moment, a brief, terrifying moment, it was also real. The Nazis wanted to build it. They designed it. They approved it. They came this close to actually constructing it. And that should scare you more than the weapon itself ever could. Because somewhere, in some military planning room right now, someone is pitching the modern equivalent of the Rat. Some weapon that's too big, too expensive, too impractical to ever work properly. And there's a non-zero chance that someone else in that room is saying, "I love it. Let's build it." History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And sometimes that rhyme sounds like the grinding treads of a 1,000-ton tank that was never meant to be.